Hi, I'm Hannah Miller. Last week, I walked into my own apartment and found my mom and pregnant sister moving my things out, acting like they had every right. I'm still trying to make sense of it. Have you ever been blindsided like this? Share your story in the comments. I pushed open the door and froze. Cardboard boxes, a suitcase I hadn't packed, and stacks of my paperwork were scattered along the hallway, spilling into the parking area just beyond the door. My key felt useless in my hand, like it had lost its purpose. Linda stood in the middle of the living room, arms crossed, her face unreadable. Emily, my sister, shifted a pile of my clothes onto the couch, careful not to look at me. "Your sister needs it more," Linda said, as if that explained everything. "You live alone. It's a waste." I dropped my bag by the wall and stepped over the scattered boxes. "Wait, what do you mean, needs it more? Did you just decide that?" Linda didn't flinch. "You already signed." "I just helped you." Helped me. The word echoed in my head, oddly formal for having invaded my home and tossed my belongings, like I wasn't even there. Emily adjusted a picture frame I'd left on the shelf, eyes fixed on the floor. No denial, no protest, just motion, as if the apartment had always belonged to her now. I moved closer to the kitchen, noting that my laptop bag had been shoved onto the counter. "Where's my lease?" I demanded, scanning the room for any trace of my documents. "On the counter. I made a copy," Linda replied. The tone was dry, practiced, like reading from a script. "You wouldn't want to lose track of it, would you?" I grabbed my phone and started snapping photos. Each frame captured the disarray, the casual way my personal space had been dismantled. A dark joke formed in my mind. "Congratulations, you just won the award for Most Creative Home Invasion." Emily finally spoke, her voice low and hesitant. "It's temporary, just until, you know." She didn't finish. I didn't need her to. Her hands trembled slightly as she straightened a cushion. Linda leaned against the counter, smirking faintly. "Don't worry, you'll get it back. Someday. Or maybe a new place. Who knows? Rules are flexible when family is involved." Her words, meant to comfort, had the opposite effect. The dark irony wasn't lost on me. Family help, in this case, was the problem. Boxes lined the hall in uneven rows. My coffee mug lay inverted on a stack of files. Even the cat carrier had been moved to the balcony. A smile twisted briefly on my lips despite everything. At least I could laugh at the absurdity, the chaos, the sense of betrayal perfectly cataloged in digital photos that would someday prove this moment real. I crouched to pick up a folder and noticed my old journal tucked beneath a pile of blankets. Even that had been disturbed. That's when the thought hit me. This wasn't just inconvenience or misjudgment. It was a statement, a demonstration of power. Emily flinched as I straightened the folder. "I'm taking pictures," I said calmly. "For insurance. For the record. For everything." Linda only tilted her head and raised an eyebrow. "Sure, take pictures. I'll wait." The parking lot smelled faintly of exhaust and dust, a reminder that life outside my apartment didn't care about my problems. I leaned against my car, scrolling through the pictures I'd taken, and noticed a few neighbors lingering, their eyes flitting between the boxes, the suitcase, and me. One muttered something about family drama under his breath. Another just shook her head, probably wondering why anyone would live here if this was normal. My phone rang, and I answered it with a short, clipped, "Hello?" Linda's voice poured through the speaker, exaggerated and dripping with what I could only call practiced sorrow. "Hannah, I can't believe you're letting this go so far. Emily's pregnant, and you're being unreasonable. This isn't just about you anymore," she said. I didn't reply, just let it hang while she filled the air with blame. A few seconds passed. Then another voicemail followed almost immediately, repeating the same story with slight variations, as though rehearsing it for an audience of one. Emily texted me shortly after. "Please understand. Don't make this worse. Just let it slide." The words hovered in my inbox, as if trying to frame my resistance as the problem. I exhaled and dialed the management office. Marcus Reed answered almost immediately. "Marcus, my apartment," I started, then paused, realizing how absurd it sounded. "My apartment has been occupied. by my mother and sister. He clicked his tongue lightly. I saw the emails. You're the sole leaseholder, correct? Yes, I said. Sole leaseholder. Good, he replied. Send a copy of your lease and ID to confirm. That will start the official record. Until then, document everything. Pictures, notes, everything. Will this help me get them out? I asked, feeling a twinge of frustration. If your name is on the lease, everything else is noise, Marcus said, a faintly ironic edge in his tone, almost as if he were acknowledging the theater unfolding while remaining strictly neutral. I can't interfere personally, but this will make the situation official. I hung up and opened my laptop in the small corner table of the parking lot, where the wind carried a mix of dust and faint exhaust. Typing felt mechanical, but necessary. I attached the lease, a photo of the living room with boxes scattered, and the stack of papers now lying in disarray on the hallway floor. At work, I had called in for half a day, leaving an email to my manager simply stating I needed personal time. The response came almost immediately. Approved. No questions asked, no concern, no curiosity, no, are you okay? Just a machine-like acknowledgement. Somehow it made me smile. At least one system understood paperwork better than people. My phone buzzed again. Another voicemail from Linda, replaying the familiar guilt-laden message. Hannah, I can't believe this. Emily's pregnant. You're tearing the family apart. Think of the responsibility. I let it go to the automatic transcription, reading the words silently while continuing to attach files. The absurdity of documenting my own eviction underlines life's dark irony. I had to prove my existence in my own home. Emily's text continued too. Mom's just worried. Please, Hannah, don't escalate. I typed a quick reply. Escalate to the management office. Document everything. That's what I'm doing. She didn't respond. I suspected she didn't know what else to say. By mid-afternoon, my email had gone through. The system acknowledged receipt with a generic, almost mocking line. Your request has been received. I stared at it and had to chuckle quietly. A machine that had no sense of irony or human conflict now bore witness to the invasion of my home. The humor was bitter, but it existed, proof that even in chaos, the universe had a sense of black comedy. I walked back to my car, stretching and shaking my arms to clear tension. Neighbors had gone, leaving me with the faint hum of engines and the occasional creak of a tire over the asphalt. The apartment building looked the same from the outside, sterile, bland, unremarkable. But behind its doors, my life had been rearranged, claimed, and challenged. I snapped a few more photos for the record, the balcony door where my cat carrier had been shoved, the stack of my mail now folded in Emily's bag, and the empty coffee mug teetering on top of scattered files. Each click felt like marking territory I had not surrendered willingly. Marcus had said everything outside the lease was noise, but noise had a weight when it included your mother and sister. Still, a faint satisfaction crept in. At least the system would recognize reality, even if people didn't. I'd become a reporter documenting my own eviction, a curator of proof for what should have been obvious. I sat at the corner table of the convenience store, tapping through my emails and scrolling past the receipts I hadn't yet filed. A half-empty cup of coffee trembled in my hand as the line behind me shuffled, impatient or just curious. The phone vibrated, and Marcus Reed's name flashed on the screen. Hannah, I need to go over your lease signature, he said when I answered. It shows signs of being scanned. Doesn't match the archive copy. Scanned? I echoed, the words sticking in my throat. I never signed a scanned copy. It's all originals on my end. Marcus sighed, a sound of someone bearing the weight of absurd bureaucracy. There's another copy in the system, he said slowly. It came from an authorized family member. My stomach sank. That would be my mother, but I never authorized her to sign anything. Noted, Marcus replied. I'll need time to verify everything. In the meantime, prepare for potential legal disputes if this escalates. Documentation, photos, any record you can provide. I hung up and stared at the screen, the coffee now forgotten. The absurdity of the situation settled in. My own mother could quietly insert a document into the system, and suddenly I was the one under scrutiny. The humor was dark, almost perverse, the sort of family theater that seemed scripted for maximum irony. The notification on my phone caught my attention, a social media post from Emily. Sometimes the hardest heart to reach is the one you think loves you. The vague guilt trap jabbed at me and I smirked. She knew what she was doing, sending the message to friends and family while pretending it was public wisdom. Before I could think too much, a call came from work. Linda had appeared at the reception desk, talking to the front office staff. The receptionist looked uncomfortable, glancing at me as I typed notes. Her voice carried enough for me to catch snippets. This isn't just about me. She's being heartless. Responsibility. The same rehearsed tone I'd heard a dozen times, now playing to an audience of strangers. I took a deep breath and typed a quick message to Emily. Document everything. No assumptions. No reply. Probably she was busy polishing the narrative for her friends online. Marcus's email arrived a few minutes later, confirming he needed the original lease and ID for verification. The words were neutral, precise, almost indifferent. Please submit the requested documents to initiate the review process. Any additional submissions will be logged. I pulled the lease from my bag and laid it beside my phone, photos still open of the living room chaos, the balcony, and scattered papers. Each snapshot reminded me of the black comedy in the situation. Everything I owned, rearranged and claimed, while the system sat like a referee who refused to blink. One hand hovered over the email compose button, hesitating. Reporting the unauthorized entry felt extreme, but necessary. I drafted the message to the management office, noting the suspected falsified signature, the items moved without consent, and the potential risk of repeated trespass. Sending it felt like marking a border, drawing a line around the chaos. The confirmation ping from the system landed almost immediately. Your request has been received. The cold, automated acknowledgement might as well have been a smirk. The rules acknowledged me, but people still hadn't. I saved the drafts, taking care to label each attachment clearly. Lease original, photos hallway, inventory notes. Organization became armor. There was humor in knowing that the machines would record what humans refused to admit. My mother's small coup was documented for posterity, complete with timestamps. By the time I finished, the store had emptied, except for the clerk at the counter, glancing up as I packed my bag. I didn't explain anything. Nothing needed explaining. The absurdity of the day, the mix of family theatrics, legal logistics, and social posturing, had reached a point where any conversation seemed pointless. I left the table, tucked my documents into a backpack, and paused at the door. Outside, the parking lot sprawled with the usual mix of cars and impatient drivers. The apartment building loomed in the distance, indifferent and unhelpful. Even at a distance, the boxes in the hallway could be seen, a silent testament to the intrusion. A faint laugh escaped me, quiet but sharp, the kind that comes from seeing the humor in being forced to defend your own life with nothing but paperwork. The dark irony wasn't lost. The same family that claimed care had created a mess so absurd it required official documentation to survive. I took a step toward my car, checked my phone again, and confirmed the email had sent without error. Marcus's words echoed in my mind. If your name is on the lease, everything else is noise. The statement was practical, yet ironically perfect. The chaos of my mother and sister had no weight here, not yet. The system recognized me, and for the first time since the apartment was invaded, a small fraction of control returned. The key turned, or at least it should have. The lock didn't budge, no matter how I twisted it, and a sharp click confirmed what I already suspected. The lock had been changed. Leaning against the door, I tried to keep my voice steady. Everything's been arranged legally, Linda called out from the other side, her tone like she was reading from a manual. You'll understand soon. I knocked, tapped the door with the heel of my hand, even tried rattling the knob, but it was useless. My apartment, the space I had lived in, paid for, and protected, was suddenly inaccessible, held hostage by procedure and family alike. Emily appeared briefly at the window, her belly noticeable now, hands pressed against the glass. She mouthed something, probably another plea, but I didn't catch the words. My camera phone was in my bag, documenting the lock, the door frame, the little remnants of my life that had been shifted. Dark humor seeped in. The same apartment I had left for a short errand now required legal intervention just to touch. The next call came from Marcus Reed. His tone was firm, but there was an undertone that hinted at amusement in the absurdity of the situation. "Hannah," he said, "you cannot enter the apartment while the investigation is ongoing. Any attempt could complicate the case. Document everything instead." I leaned against my car, exhaling. Complicating the case, an odd way to phrase being denied access to my own home. "Noted," I muttered, though the words felt meaningless. That evening, my phone buzzed with another message, this time from Emily. "Mom filed a complaint. Says you're harassing us and causing emotional distress. Please, Hannah." The text hung like a warning. I typed back, "I'm following protocol. You know this is necessary." Later, another notification appeared. My mother had submitted an official complaint, citing me as a disruptor of family peace. The irony wasn't lost on me. In trying to reclaim what belonged to me, I'd become the villain in their narrative. I smirked despite the circumstances. Family rules, apparently, came with their own version of logic. A hotel keycard slid across the front desk as I checked into a room for the night. The place was neutral, impersonal, and yet it was a temporary haven. My belongings were stacked carefully on the bed, photos and documents ready for the next step. It was a strange kind of victory. I could stay somewhere without interference, but the apartment, the real source of the problem, remained behind a reinforced door, controlled by the very people I was documenting. The email from the management system arrived while I was unpacking a few essentials. The message was blunt, procedural, and devoid of any empathy. "Your request has been forwarded to the next stage of processing. All parties are reminded of their legal obligations. Non-compliance may result in penalties." I read it twice, trying not to laugh. The system acknowledged the chaos, noted my existence, but gave no comfort, no reassurance. It was pure accountability, stripped of sentiment. The humor was bitter, almost comforting in its honesty. Machines could see reality where people chose to blur it. My phone buzzed again. Another voicemail from Linda, replaying rehearsed lines about family, responsibility, and Emily's health. I let it ring until it stopped automatically, reading the transcript instead. Every word felt like a rehearsal for drama, a performance meant to unsettle me. The hotel room became my command center. I spread files across the small desk, grouping photos, notes, and email chains. Each attachment prepared, every observation documented, an evidence trail of absurdity. The door might be closed, but the record was open and undeniable. Even from a distance, the apartment seemed like a fortress. The boxes, the displaced furniture, the remnants of my possessions, each item silently testified to the lengths my mother and sister had gone to redefine ownership. A cynical part of me appreciated the precision, the deliberate effort, as if they had studied a manual on how to remove someone from their own life without firing a shot. By late evening, the system confirmed that my submission had been logged and moved to active review. Another automated message, devoid of reassurance. "Your case is now under investigation. Further correspondence will follow." I leaned back, letting the tension leave my shoulders slowly. The apartment remained unreachable. The family theatrics continued. But I had begun mapping the route forward. Documentation, procedure, proof. The tools of control had shifted from physical to administrative, and I intended to wield them carefully. As I unpacked a small bag, settling into the impersonal routine of a temporary stay, the dark irony lingered. I was displaced, restricted, and yet armed with the very evidence that would ensure the chaos could not stand unchecked. The hotel room felt too small for the amount of paperwork spread across the desk. My laptop hummed as I scrolled through the latest emails from the management office. Each message reminded me that nothing about this was optional anymore. The phone rang. Linda's voice came through, tight and urgent. "Hannah, please, for Emily, stop this. Everyone's worried. This isn't worth it." I held the receiver, but didn't answer. Minutes later, another call. Her tone shifted to guilt, rehearsed lines about responsibility and care, designed to make me hesitate. My relatives began calling too, each repetition of the story nudging the same point. Think about the baby, Hannah, please. Emails arrived from the legal system, curt and precise. They requested a formal statement about the alleged falsification of my lease signature. The words hit differently than my family's pleas. This wasn't just inconvenience. It was now documented, official, and enforceable. Sitting back, I realized what I had allowed. My mother had held my documents, altered the lease, and I had never set clear boundaries. Years of quiet compliance had given her a template for overreach. The mistake was mine as much as it was theirs. Marcus called, a neutral tone layered with subtle warning. Hannah, the situation could escalate to criminal proceedings if the investigation finds evidence of fraud, he said. I swallowed. Criminal proceedings. That word sharpened the stakes in a way my mother's tears never could. She had built a story, cast me as the villain, but the system didn't negotiate on sentiment. The responsibility was mine, to document, to submit, to defend. I opened a new document, writing the account clearly. Timeline, events, names, actions. Each detail had to be accurate. Every photo I had taken, every email, every text message from Emily, all cataloged. The humor in it was bitter. I had to prove that my mother had overstepped, that the apartment she claimed to help me with was mine. A form of dark comedy, I thought, that life would make you defend the obvious with so much paper. Voicemails piled up while I typed. Linda repeated the same phrases, alternating between pleading and accusation. Emily's messages remained cryptic, advising me to understand and don't escalate. I ignored them. The system required evidence, not opinions. The moment to make a decision arrived. Either retract my reports, let the family narrative stand and maintain a fragile peace, or continue, accepting the social fallout and familial anger that would surely follow. The choice wasn't morally comfortable, but it was the only one that respected facts. I clicked through each submission box, attaching photographs of the apartment, copies of the lease, and notes cataloging the day my belongings were displaced. Each click echoed with irony. Proving your existence in your own home required creating a paper trail and submitting it to strangers. The confirmation email arrived immediately. Your case is now under review. Further requests for information may be issued. Please comply fully to avoid complications. No comfort, no good luck. Just the cold recognition that my actions were logged, binding, and irreversible. I leaned back in the chair, feeling the weight of choice more than the exhaustion. Retracting would make me a bystander to the chaos. Continuing could fracture family bonds, invite gossip, and cement my role as the antagonist in their story. Yet control was slowly returning. Each documented step pushed me back into the driver's seat, even as the consequences loomed. Marcus's earlier words lingered. If the investigation finds fraud, it could escalate. The phrase repeated like a mantra. I had already accepted that some part of the family would never forgive, that social perception might turn, and that the emotional fallout could linger. But the alternative, ignoring evidence, letting the apartment remain out of reach, was worse. I organized the desk, separating documents by priority: legal statements, photo evidence, timelines. Each folder felt like armor, each file a small victory. Black humor tickled the edges of my thoughts. The apartment had been taken, my family had staged a silent coup, and yet the cold precision of the system was the first ally I had. Machines didn't negotiate, didn't cry, didn't argue. They just recorded truth. Calls and notifications continued in the background, but I didn't answer. Instead, I finalized my submission, attached every relevant file, and hit send. The screen confirmed receipt, a mechanical acknowledgement that neither comforted nor condemned, only recognized. For the first time in days, I allowed myself to lean back fully, breathing through the tension. There was no immediate resolution, no triumph. The apartment was still unreachable, the families still entwined in their own narrative. But the documentation, the submitted statement, the official acknowledgement, they were steps toward reclaiming what was mine. Marcus Reed called me into the management office, his expression unreadable. Yet the office felt less like a workplace and more like a tribunal. I set my bag down and opened the file on my laptop. The system had completed its initial analysis. "Hannah," Marcus began, voice steady, "the signature on your lease has been confirmed as fraudulent." My stomach tightened. Fraudulent? Yes, the file came from a device previously used by Linda Miller, he explained. It matches another record from an old family transaction. I blinked, processing the implication. My mother had done this before, and now I had evidence. A part of me found grim amusement in it. The same person who lectured about morality and responsibility had built a small empire of manipulation within the family, relying on silent compliance and assumed trust. Linda called later that day, summoned for questioning by the management office. Her voice was loud, dramatic. "You've gone too far, Hannah." "You're dragging me into trouble," she shouted over the phone. "Do you realize what you're doing to me?" I stayed silent, letting the words hang. Emily interjected briefly through text, attempting a temporary compromise. "Can we just share the apartment for a few weeks? Let's not escalate this further." The absurdity of the offer made me smirk. Share the apartment? The space had already been violated, my belongings moved, and my mother had inserted a falsified signature. Negotiating a temporary truce felt like a parody of compromise. Marcus advised patience while the verification continued. "Once we confirm everything, you'll regain your lease rights," he said. "But expect formal procedures and be ready for any disputes the occupants may raise." I nodded, knowing this was procedural, impersonal, yet utterly necessary. The black humor in the situation tickled at the edges of my mind. My mother, attempting to manipulate reality, had created a paper trail that now documented her own overreach. In a way, the bureaucracy itself was my ally, mechanically impartial and quietly mocking human drama. Later, I received a detailed report. Linda's digital fingerprints matched past documents where she had conducted similar maneuvers on a different family property. The pattern was clear, and the management office recognized the duplicity. Every altered signature, every unauthorized file submission was now recorded. Walking down the hall toward the parking lot, I glanced at the apartments around me. The building's exterior seemed ordinary, unassuming. Only I knew the chaos behind one door. Every misused document, every displaced item, every veiled text message had contributed to a record that finally worked in my favor. The dark irony was sharp. Years of manipulation by my mother had been undone not by confrontation, but by the mechanical impartiality of a system she had never considered as a threat. The system officially recognized my rights. My lease was confirmed, valid, and exclusive. The validation came through a neutral email, mechanical in tone. Lease ownership verified. All parties notified. Non-compliance may result in enforcement actions. However, the situation remained tense. Authorities were notified to address the unlawful occupation, and the possibility of police intervention was real. The apartment was mine on paper, but the presence of my mother and sister remained a volatile variable. The absurdity of the moment didn't escape me. A place that should have been domestic and familiar had become a stage for formal enforcement, legal scrutiny, and family theatrics. Linda's calls persisted, alternating between accusations and dramatized pleas for empathy. Each message revealed her frustration, her inability to process that the system had recognized reality rather than her version of events. Emily sent sporadic messages too, oscillating between negotiation and guilt-tripping, but the official confirmation undercut both attempts. I organized the documentation once more, ensuring every photo, email, and note was properly labeled. The evidence, once a defensive tool, was now the basis for reclaiming authority over my space. The humor in it was dark, the kind that makes you shake your head at human absurdity. A mother's meticulous attempts to manipulate had produced a paper trail strong enough to enforce boundaries and rights. Walking back to the office door, Marcus reminded me of the next steps. "Prepare for enforcement," he said. Authorities will be present. Your lease rights are solid, but be ready for resistance. I exhaled slowly, the tension ebbing slightly. Control had returned, but it came with procedural weight and confrontation. The irony lingered. My mother's strategy to claim power over my apartment had backfired spectacularly, documented and undeniable, awaiting formal action to restore reality. As I left the office, the parking lot stretched empty and silent. The apartment building stood indifferent, yet the forthcoming intervention ensured that the situation would no longer be dictated by improvisation or familial manipulation. The system had spoken, and for once, it recognized truth over theatrics. The hallway smelled faintly of detergent and concrete, the usual hum of apartment life buzzing faintly around us. I stood with Marcus Reed, the assistant manager, while police officers shuffled paperwork and exchanged brief nods. The key to my apartment hung heavy in my pocket, a symbol of authority I hadn't held for weeks. Linda's voice pierced the quiet air, trembling with anger. "You'd do this to your own mother?" "You started it," I replied, steady and concise. Her eyes flared. Emily hovered near the doorway, holding a small pile of clothes, glancing at the neighbors peeking from windows and stairwells. Every eye seemed fixed on the scene, a mix of curiosity and judgment. The officers explained the procedure. 30 minutes. Every item belonging to Linda and Emily had to be removed. Any attempt to stay past that time would be treated as obstruction. The legal language sounded absurdly precise against the domestic chaos that had been building for weeks. Emily moved silently, stacking boxes and bags methodically, avoiding my gaze. She tried to make the process quick, almost mechanical, as if compliance would earn her mercy. Linda, however, shouted sporadically, alternating between accusations and pleading. "This is insane," she yelled. "Hannah, you've gone too far." "You went too far first," I said, voice level, letting the words land. The black humor wasn't lost on me. The same woman who had justified tossing my belongings now accused me of cruelty, as if the universe had drafted a perfect irony for this confrontation. One officer stepped forward, clipboard in hand. "All personal items must be cleared before we change the locks," he instructed, motioning to the boxes and bags stacked along the hallway. The statement, cold and procedural, underscored that control had shifted. Authority was no longer negotiable, and the system didn't negotiate with feelings or guilt. Linda's protests escalated. "You're ruining everything. You're destroying the family. Do you have any idea what you're doing? Do you know what you did?" I shot back, unclenching my fists, letting the words hang like a tally of wrongs. Emily paused mid-step, then continued, her movements stiff but efficient. Boxes slid across the floor, clothes stacked hastily into bags, and personal items organized without comment. The contrast was stark. One person performing in outrage, the other performing in compulsion. Neighbors leaned from stair rails, whispered questions floating in the air. "What's going on? Is that really Hannah?" The spectacle had drawn an audience, and their presence added weight to the proceedings. Their curiosity, silent and impartial, emphasized the absurdity of Linda's dramatic claims. Marcus stepped toward the door, ensuring compliance. 30 minutes starts now, he said, checking his watch. Any interference beyond that, and we escalate. Linda flailed, grabbing a box. "You'll regret this. Emily will never forgive you." "Regret is already yours," I replied under my breath, a faint smirk twitching at the corner of my lips. The humor was sharp and dark, their melodrama unfolding against the cold machinery of procedure, each complaint meticulously documented. Emily slid a bag toward the open hallway, her hands steady despite the tension. I noted the contrast again. She moved as if performing a choreographed sequence, Linda screaming in chaotic rhythm. The officers made no comment, allowing the sequence to play out exactly as dictated by the rules, not sentiment. Time passed quickly. The 30 minutes dwindled, measured in precise steps and checked boxes. Items cleared, bags carried down to waiting cars, boxes stacked neatly at the curb. The apartment, once occupied by force, gradually returned to the parameters set by the lease. The final moments were tense. Linda's voice pitched higher, desperation and indignation colliding. "Hannah, this isn't over. You think you've won?" "Not my problem," I said, shrugging, as the officers nodded, noting the completion of the removal. The locks were changed immediately, a simple turn of metal signaling the restoration of authority. Emily lingered briefly, eyes downcast, then followed her mother, carrying the last of her belongings. The hallway emptied, neighbors retreating to their routines, leaving a silence that was neither peaceful nor celebratory. It was neutral, procedural, undeniable. Marcus checked the new lock, then handed me a small card confirming the apartment's secure status. All set, leaseholder rights reinstated. I slid the key into my pocket and ran my hand along the hallway railing, noting the absence of movement behind the door. The apartment was mine, the evidence intact, and the legal process had enforced what words alone never could. The black humor lingered, faint but present. A family drama reduced to time-stamped actions, signatures, and boxes, with irony serving as a silent witness. The email arrived first, neutral and impersonal, confirming what I already suspected. The system had closed the case. Linda's actions, falsifying documents, unauthorized entry, were now recorded and recognized officially. Emily had no claim, no legal foothold, and the apartment was mine by every metric the management office valued. I stepped into the hallway, carrying the last of my belongings. Boxes and bags moved over the past few weeks had returned to their rightful place, and I began organizing the space with deliberate care. Each item was restored to a location that made sense to me, not anyone else. There was a subtle satisfaction in moving objects freely, a small but pointed reminder that control had shifted back. The lock clicked as I secured the new key in the door. A faint smirk passed over my lips. The irony wasn't lost. The same apartment that had been commandeered, the same space invaded and manipulated, was now under my authority, recognized not by argument or complaint, but by the impartial weight of procedure and evidence. I pulled a small sign from the top drawer, one I had written quickly a week ago when frustration had boiled over. Home, by my own rules. It hung casually on the wall near the door, a simple declaration of boundaries. The humor was subtle, dark even, a reminder to anyone who might overstep again that the space belonged entirely to me. No theatrics, no confrontation, just a clear line drawn in the most mundane of ways. Calls and messages from my mother ceased almost immediately. Any attempt at persuasion or guilt-tripping would fall into the void. Emily did not reach out again. Her earlier offers of compromise evaporated under the weight of documentation and authority. The family dynamic had shifted, not reconciled, not forgiven, just frozen in place, defined by cold, procedural acknowledgement rather than emotion. I arranged my desk and workspace, returning to routines interrupted by weeks of chaos. Logistics reports, schedules, emails, all normal work tasks filled the empty hours, grounding me. The irony wasn't that life continued, but that I could continue it uninterrupted in a space that had almost been taken from me. The system had enforced boundaries where people failed, leaving me to settle the practicalities. Boxes were unpacked, clothes hung, files stacked in neat piles. Each action was deliberate, each placement reinforcing the regained authority. No one applauded or congratulated me. The satisfaction was internal, quiet, tied to the precision of routine rather than any sense of victory over the family. The black humor lingered in the absurdity of it all. Weeks of emotional upheaval, invasive tactics, and manipulative pleas reduced to files, locks, and signatures. Reality had been restored not by drama, but by methodical verification. The apartment felt lived in again, in a way that belonged to me exclusively. I brewed coffee, set the cup on the counter, and allowed a moment to appreciate the ordinary, the rhythm of a space that obeyed no one but me. The past chaos hung lightly in the corners, Linda's voice, Emily's messages, but it no longer dictated actions or decisions. I glanced at the calendar on the wall. Workdays, appointments, deliveries, each marked and planned, offered structure. The intrusion had forced clarity. Boundaries, documentation, and careful observation would protect the life I had built. The humor remained in the process itself. The family's attempts to control, now neutralized, had inadvertently supplied the evidence that made this reclamation possible. Calls from Marcus or the management office were now procedural, brief, confirming compliance and acknowledging the conclusion. The system, impersonal and precise, had done what people could not. Its silence was its statement. Justice existed in formality, in records, in unfeeling acknowledgement. I leaned back against the counter and reviewed the apartment. Every item in place, every space under my authority, the door locked securely. The room was mine, not by negotiation, not by compromise, but by procedure, persistence, and adherence to rules. The dark humor persisted in the incongruity. Weeks of chaos, manipulation, and emotional tension distilled into documents, timestamps, and locks. Returning to work the next day, the rhythm of logistics filled my schedule. The office didn't need an explanation. Colleagues noticed nothing. The apartment had been reclaimed, boundaries set, and my autonomy restored. Control was quiet, uncelebrated, and final. Life resumed its ordinary pattern, but the lesson remained embedded. Authority, once ceded by inaction, could be regained through precise action and unflinching adherence to fact. The sign by the door remained, a silent witness to boundaries reinforced. Home, by my own rules. I walked to the counter to make coffee again, noting the clean surfaces, the order I had imposed, and the absence of interference. The apartment hummed with mundane life, uninterrupted by drama, and that, in itself, was the victory. Not loud, not celebrated, just a return to normalcy, measured in quiet routines, deliberate choices, and the knowledge that boundaries were no longer negotiable. Word count, 800.